So she and I have been trying to work on kind of what a, well, one, I'll give everybody just a quick history. When I first started here, Julie's been a fantastic help for our office and fire safety throughout the state. So they have, the whole office has been a great, the whole division has been a great resource for us to work with and been a really good partnership. So when we started looking at mobile food units, right about when I started here at the state is when hood suppression units were starting to be required. And so the question came up, we did not amend that out of our code. And the question came up, well, are we going to go with this or not? The decision was, yes, we're going to do that, focusing on new licenses or new ones coming into the state or new ones that are in the state, not necessarily going retroactive. And maybe Julie can expand on that more when we kind of get to that point. But so we started working with them to provide them the information on what's required as far as fire safety in the mobile food units and working with them. That's been a good process so far. However, I think what we have, or what's been identified over the last 4 or 5 years, is we just have a lot of different processes. So everybody's doing something, they're just maybe doing it different ways. And what we want to move towards is that level playing field where we all have a common approach so that our vendors aren't seeing something different in different places.
Hey, Doug, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you.
Yeah.
I do have there is a newer version than that. I can share my
Oh,
screen if you don't have
okay,
it
sure.
handy.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
So Julie will share that. And what we wanted to do then today was we started working on basically putting on paper kind of essentially what our approach is, what we hope or think would work for local fire districts and local food or health licensing divisions, and work towards that common approach with, I think the end goal would be to have a reciprocity type system to where they can get licensed at the state, they can get licensed at the local units, and any which way it'll be recognized through reciprocity. So that's what we are hopefully working towards and moving towards, and what we wanted to talk through today. So today, I guess our biggest focus would be kind of the fire items that I call out on this draft. What do you want to call it? Fact sheet, direction sheet, guide, whatever, on mobile food licensing units. So as we'll run through that, I'll just kind of read through it here. I'd really appreciate any and all input, feedback, questions, concerns with specifically the fire code items listed on here, and then just kind of the approach of it for the fire, for all of you as well in the different fire districts. And then Julie will run through her stuff and how they plan to kind of try to make this consistent with all of the licensing units as much as we possibly can. And if those two kind of groups, if the fire districts or departments and the mobile food licensors both agree that this is a good approach that we can all work towards, or we can make the different amendments that need to be made and then move forward, then hopefully we will all have a very similar approach that we can rely on. And like I said, long-term goal, I guess, I don't know how long-term versus short-term, but the end goal I think is basically reciprocity, because we all do it consistently. So I'll start with that. If there are any questions, please feel free to pop in, just ask or raise your hand, and I'll try to keep an eye on that. So whereas mobile food units, when parked, constitute a structure and may be located in temporary locations difficult for fire department access, cooking operations remain one of the leading causes of fires in North Dakota. The following information is provided to assist mobile food unit operators. This information was developed in coordination with the local public health units, local fire departments, North Dakota Department of Health and Human Services Food and Lodging Unit, and the State Fire Marshal's Office's guidance to ensure a consistent and safe approach to mobile food unit licensing and inspection across the state. That's our intro as to why this is important and what we're doing. Do you want to scroll down to the fire code stuff, and I'll just kind of cover that quick? So we have it broken down into the licensing requirements and the fire code requirements. So Fire Code of North Dakota, we insert our link there. which on our page where that link is also has links to the different delegations of authority where you have your own codes adopted. So hopefully if somebody clicks on that link, it would take them to notice that there's other places where they can do this as well. Includes some important fire safety requirements for mobile food units, including the following. Please note this is not an all-encompassing list, just some of the items specific to mobile food units. So in my head, this is kind of the big stuff that we really need to make sure that both the vendors and our licensing partners are aware of to be able to identify or check on. So this, again, this is not all encompassing. I don't think we can really, all encompassing is always difficult to squeeze on some sort of a paper guide or a one pager. But we did try to call out the biggest stuff so we can hopefully get in front of those if we can put out information like this or make it available on websites. So the first one and biggest one obviously is type 1 kitchen hood ventilation and fire suppression system. That was in 319.3. I think as we move to the 24 code, that gets moved to a new chapter 40 some for us fire code geeks out there. I think there's a new chapter 41 that it gets moved to.
41.
So we'll have to change that, but currently under 2021, I believe that is the right reference. So essentially is if you're producing grease-laden vapor in an amount that accumulates on surfaces, then it's required. So our approach, and I don't know if this is everybody's approach, has always been, because there is an exemption for if you produce so little grease vapors that you don't need it. So our approach has always been, well, if you are producing so much that it accumulates and you can't keep up with it with just regular cleaning, then that's the point when you are essentially adding a fuel load. So if you go and inspect it or get called because it looks gross and dirty and you show up and there's visible grease buildup on the walls or physical, you can touch it and wipe a good chunk of it off, then obviously there is additional fuel load. That's pretty hard to refute if that went to court, that you're not adding fuel load and that a hood suppression system shouldn't be in place. So that's always been our approach on how we actually enforce that. If there's, other approaches, we can consider that. That's just what we tried to describe in there. Basically, if it's going to accumulate on the surfaces to the point where regular cleaning of your kitchen can't remove that, then you have a high risk cooking operation that's adding additional fuel load to your mobile food unit. A kitchen hood fire suppression system shall be supported by a Class K fire extinguisher, and they shall be maintained annually for seasonal operation. So I believe this was actually, did we find this in code, I think? Julie, do you remember last time we talked about this or?
Yeah, we did. We kind of, this area is highlighted because we wanted to call out the seasonal operation, which is kind of typical what you see with this industry. And so I think the code might specifically require 2 fire suppression system inspections within a year, but also just kind of applying common sense to that in that these are not operating year round. So you wanted to maybe reference more of the seasonal operations and what that requirement might be. So instead of twice a year, at least maintain annually is kind of what we landed on for this draft and what this comment is referring to.
So I think that is actually, I think we pulled that actually from code, that somewhere it says, for seasonal operation, it's just annually. But either way, it kind of seems like it makes sense with that type of business. Seems like if we tried to make people do a semi-annual and we made them do one after their season and then before their season and their trailer is just shut down for that whole time period, it seemed kind of silly to do a cleaning if they haven't been cooking on there. So questions, concerns, comments on that. We did want to run that by everybody and see what the thoughts were.
I have a quick question. This is Jill from Williston.
Yep.
Um, so, we have the same situation where they start up around May and they end, I don't know, around September or October. Um, the twice a year, does just doing it one time a year, does it affect the medium that's inside of the suppression system? Is that like continuous with like the manufacturer's recommendations, or is it just because of the potential for grease like blocking the piping, and so they have to have somebody, to come out and verify that that's all functional? Like, what's the reason for the twice a year?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just the amount. I mean, I think depends on your cleaning schedule. I think that's just in code though. Or sorry, no, that's not cleaning. That's just operation. I guess I don't know. I'm not sure the why of that. I'd have to go a little deeper and look into if there's commentary on that.
There is. In 606.3.3.1 is inspection on the hood systems for restaurants and everything. And there's a table in there that basically breaks it down into 6 months, 1 month, 12 months, and 3 months. And the 12 month is obviously on like low volume cooking. So when they don't have a lot of grease vapors at all. So it kind of just breaks it down based upon how much vapors and grease buildup they're going to have, how often they're supposed to be inspected and cleaned.
And sorry, I think I confused cleaning schedule and system maintenance. So this one's calling out system maintenance, not cleaning schedule.
Okay. Sorry.
I think cleaning schedule would still just be kind of whatever the demand is. But the system maintenance is I think where we're looking at.
I think what we've been told is it's based on keeping the links and everything clean and the cables operating, those kind of things. And that's for heavier use, which is exactly why you can drop to a year for like churches and food trucks and different places like that. But it's strictly because of making sure the mechanisms are working and the fusible links aren't coated.
Okay.
Doug, just a suggestion, maybe change maintain to something more specific than if it's cleaning versus, since we do have the two different frequencies, one for system inspection and the other for cleaning inspection, maybe just a different
They
word
are
for
in
that.
two different areas of the code.
Yep, I'm
There's
just
two
talking about this
specific
document.
areas.
Yep, just this document I'm talking where it says maintained annually.
It does say fire suppression system.
Shall be serviced. Or
that's what it says. It doesn't say anything about the cleaning. It just says the fire suppression system shall be maintained annually.
Okay. I'd go with, I guess, whatever is the code say maintained. Does anybody have that section pulled up? I'd have to look. I'll double check the code on that one and we'll go with whatever the code language is. So good comments. Thank you. Any issues with the way that section's written? Or does everybody agree with that? And that's what would it be enforcing? Okay. The next section we called out was 319.5. Gas cooking appliances shall be secured in place and connected to the fuel supply piping in an acceptable manner. Trying to just call out, we don't want stuff roaming around pulling gas lines out of place. It's specifically in code under 319.5, so I don't think there's any issue. I would think everybody would be fine with how that's written. I do think I took a little liberty in the description afterwards there, the way that that's written to as an acceptable manner to give us a little bit of gray area. I can't remember exactly how that's written. I'll pull it up here.
just to go back to that code, it's 904.13.5 for operation and maintenance of commercial cooking systems.
Okay. This one, yeah, I think I didn't, this says with the within manufacturer's installation instructions. So I think I just kind of tried to go with a little wider language for us to kind of, we can still encompass that. This isn't necessarily the code. This is just guidance. So I think we're okay on 319.5. Any other comments on it? Same thing with 319.6 and 319.7. The code can be lengthy and detailed on this, so to try to keep it simple and straightforward, I just said needs to be stored in a manner compliant with fire code to give the fire code official or the licensor the leeway to make a judgment on if it looks, safe and proper, or if it looks like it's going to cause an issue or is a fire hazard. Questions, comments in that section? All right, 319.8. LP tanks shall not exceed 200 pounds and shall be securely mounted to prevent movement. Containers shall comply with 58 LP gas code and maintain in a manner to prevent tampering or damage. LP gas alarm shall be installed within the vehicle. I think we have a question on that one. Contact your local fire department for requirements of compressed natural gas systems. Same thing. I'd like to hear with that group what they think of those two bullet points, and then gas containers shall be annually approved or shall be inspected annually by an approved inspection company that is registered with the U.S. Department of Transportation. So I guess maybe just take those one by one. I think we need to have something on there for LP gas. If you all have not seen the Philadelphia incident that took place, I think in the 2000 teens somewhere, that is where they had an LP gas leak and basically exploded a city block from them. So I think we need to have something on there and some sort of guidance for both our licensors and for the food unit people. I just didn't know exactly how and what to cover. Like I said, this isn't necessarily encompassing all the code. This is just, we need some guidance out there so that we're looking and thinking about these things. So comments on those. Are we okay with how that's written? Is that how we want it written? Are those the things we want called out? Are there different specifics that we want to make sure everyone's aware of on the LP gas tanks? Do we have any issue with the 200-pound limit? It seems pretty large, so I can't imagine that that's a problem. Anything? All right. If I don't hear anything, then we're going to plug along with the way it is. So keep moving along here. If you see any issues or come up with anything, stop me and we'll come back and talk about it. All right. 319.10. Hey, here we're again to cleaning. So kitchen hood exhaust system shall be cleaned at an interval that prevents unacceptable levels of grease-laden vapors. So just with the different types of cooking that could be out there, people could be baking bread, or they could just be frying 200 burgers every day. Who knows? And it's just going to be so different. So I tried to word that as wide as we could to kind of cover that section. Any concerns with that section? Okay. So this one is another one where we had a big question. We don't have anywhere specifically in code where it says a 2A10BC or a regular fire extinguisher has to be in, or at least I couldn't find anything in code, has to be in a mobile food unit. So if anybody out there has that section of code or knows a section of code that we could kind of hang our hat on to require that, I do see where it could be valuable because you may have fires in or around these units that are not grease fires and not a class K extinguisher fire. So I do see value in it. I just didn't know where to pull it from the state or local fire codes. Does anybody have
I wonder if that came from just the hood requirements overall. I think it's listed in there somewhere where beyond the
Okay.
K, you need to have a ABC in a kitchen, and maybe that's where that came from.
Yeah, I thought there used to be something in the code that said like within 30 feet of a kitchen, you had to have a regular fire extinguisher. Does that sound right? And is that what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking at this point.
Can't think of where that comes from.
I wonder if there's anything for DOT vehicles also. You could maybe not even IFC, but just DOT requirements for occupied DOT vehicles or something.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually already heard from mobile food people that they are required by DOT to have them anyway.
Okay. So you think if we leave that in there, we kind of have a code section for each of these. So that's my only hesitation to not have that on there, is to not be pulling it from some sort of justification in our code.
So, hey, Doug, the within 30 feet of commercial cooking equipment is called out in 906. That's specific to I's and R2 college and dorms. So
okay.
it's not fully encompassing.
The NFPA, I mean, I know that it's not the ICC, but the NFPA came out with that mobile food truck, like, worksheet, or it was like a little poster that went through the requirements. And wasn't it on that as well?
I don't know. I'll have to, I'm not sure what that document is, so I'll have to look at that.
I think we leave it in there and find some place to hang, find a code reference to hang it on. Because I don't think we're going to back off on it where we want to require them to have the K and an ABC.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. Well, if anybody can kind of find a good section of hopefully out of the fire code, out of the IFC fire code, please let me know and please share it with us and we'll make sure that's in there. And for now, we'll leave it and hopefully find a code section to hang our hat on for that to kind of go back to.
Hey, Doug.
Yep.
It probably wouldn't hurt just to add the requirements for having them service annually for the KM ABC.
For the extinguishers?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can squeeze that in there.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. There you go. Thanks, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's roughly, again, we're not gonna be able to catch every code to try to get it in there. Otherwise, this thing would be 10 pages. But that was hopefully the big stuff that we wanted to catch. Is there anything that anyone in the group thinks we're missing, or that, hey, no, we're missing this big thing, we need to talk about that? I still have a couple questions and want to make sure we're going the right direction with the LP stuff, specifically the gas alarm. Is that something that we're going to enforce? I think they are pretty cheap and available commercially, as far as just a plug-in type with a battery. And does that meet all the local jurisdictions requirements?
We go by that. If we catch them without it, they can go to Menards and pick up one. They're pretty simple, just like you said. And we require them to have the inspections done and the whole thing just based off the code. We follow it.
Okay. Sounds good. And if we don't hear anything else, we'll stick to those. So if anybody that does think of anything, please let us know as we keep preparing this. The next section that we have is plan of correction. So this is just the way our office has worked through these, because as we've tried to phase this in and require this, obviously we hit lots of situations where people don't have these. We haven't been putting out notification over the last 10 years that, hey, this is coming, or it has to be in place by this time. So what we've done, our Century Code gives us the ability to accept plan of corrections where people can't meet the intent of the code right away. So we give that leeway. So if Julie's crew comes to us and says, hey, we have a trouble one here, they're not equipped, they didn't know this was an issue, what do we do? we work with them to get a plan of correction that gets submitted to both of our offices, and we accept, but we make sure that it has specific dates on there and it has a final date of when they're going to be complete. And that's kind of our notification. And I think typically we have allowed that for a year. Does that sound right, Julie? And then we've kind of told people, like, if they show up at a county fair here and they're like, I didn't even know this was a requirement in North Dakota. Sorry, I'll get it fixed in next year. Then we've kind of held them to, okay, but don't show up next year saying the same thing, because now we have a letter in place saying that, you've given us a plan that you're going to meet this by this date, and we'll work with you until that.
Yeah, that is how we've been doing it with food and lodging. And, when we get to my section on mobile food unit licensing, we'll explain how that kind of also feeds into local public health units who may not operate the exact same way as food and lodging. So, but just as kind of a model example, we would, if we came upon someone that was licensed, but did not have the proper equipment for fire suppression, and based on their menu, there were grease latent vapors, and we would typically have that conversation and then document it in our published comment on the inspection report. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a violation of our food code, right? It's a violation of fire code. And so we don't have the authority to cite them out and or necessarily enforce fire code, but we do, at the end of the day, decide who's licensed and who's not. So we are trying to have a very collaborative, uniform approach, and so everyone feels like they're treated fairly. We will not send them home per se. However, if the local fire authority sent them home, that would be fine with us, but we wouldn't send them home based on that. We would let them operate as long as, they were also compliant with our other licensing requirements. But that notation would be there. And then we would reach back out to Doug's office, let them know who we talked to and what the situation was, and essentially track that. And before we would issue that license next year, should they apply for a license renewal, we would check in with the status of that. 1 year is never really a hard stop because we are always constantly trying to work with the operator. So, that kind of is considered. And we do use some discretion, but all in all, they need to be, informed of what the requirement is. And we would expect them to be, operating up to code. So that's why that line is kind of crossed out, because I mean, we could put something in there for, yes, a plan of correction can be worked on through an agreed upon compliance schedule. But should there be a cap on that? And, what is the conversation with local fire departments? Like, are there local fire departments that would say, we absolutely would not allow anyone to operate in our city and we would send them home, versus, someone that would say, well, yeah, we'd work on a plan of correction and maybe give them a year or two to fix it. Like, what's that balance? And if there could be uniformity agreed upon, what would that look like? Otherwise, if we just left this sentence off, it would just say a plan of correction, if acceptable by all parties, may allow the mobile food unit to continue operating for the agreed upon time, and just leave it open-ended versus, putting a cap on that, which you can see, please note that no violation should be allowed on a plan of correction for longer than 1 year. So that would be option maybe number 2, and then option number 3, do we want to set up some kind of sunset clause? And start educating and informing folks under this license what the expectation is. And if so, what is that sunset clause? So those are maybe those three options. Leave it as agreed upon time, and each local authority decides what that compliance schedule looks like. Put in a hard stop or at least a guide rail for what we would expect that plan of correction to be completed by, or come up with a sunset clause. So kind of three options there.
So I guess I'll just jump in real quick. I guess my preference, or the way that our office would typically approach these, would be, we'll work with people on a plan of correction just depending on that. Now, typically we try to keep those to a year so that we don't get this extended for, all of a sudden somebody's been doing it for 5 years without anything, and they've got neighbors set up next to them who meet code. So, I definitely think we try to hold people to that year, but hey, if somebody's going to give us a plan of correction with specific dates, eventually we're going to hold them to that. So I guess my personal preference would be probably leave it pretty open-ended. And if we want something to the year, then I'd probably say, let's look at, something of a typical timeline for installation of this should be under 1 year, unless unless some sort of circumstances require longer. Maybe they can't find somebody to install it. I don't know. So I guess that would be my kind of feeling on it. Is I think it's good open-ended personally, but if we do want a timeline on there, I think I'd stick to the year. I'd avoid the sunset clause just because I think we're always going to have that issue, and it kind of creates more of an issue when you have a specific date and you just say nope, sorry, and turn people away when they maybe honestly didn't know, or even if they are trying to game the system. If you don't give them that one time at least and that notification, I think it's hard to really hold them to shut them down, and it creates more issues on the front end, which is more issues for the licensors to deal with, as far as showing up at a fair and telling people to go home and pack up. So, but with that, I just wanted to throw my thoughts out there. What other thoughts are there on there? Because this is really the fire code sections, they are what they are. They're there. So it's just going to be how do we each interpret those, and hopefully it's pretty similar. But this is where we really need to make sure we're all on the same page and agree on the same approach if this is going to work, and then we can present this to licensors once we kind of have our agreed on approach. So open it up for questions, comments, concerns, ideas, thoughts. All right.
Doug, are you seeing the chat?
No. I did, and then I took it off. Okay.
Can you see it now? Ryan
likes likes a year, since they have to be licensed once a year. Yep. Okay. Anything else from Grand Forks? I'll just run down the list of who I can identify here. All right, Ryan Young, you're in Fargo. What do you have? Are you guys still looking at adopting this?
Yeah, we're going to be adopting. We'll be removing our amendment, so we'll have to work, I imagine, with health and stuff too, and you guys to fully clarify things.
So is this what is this a good approach? Is this something you guys can work with? Are you guys looking at a different approach? That's what we want to try to make sure we're pushing everybody. We're all pushing the same direction here, and we don't all of a sudden we don't go one direction and we have different departments going another.
Yeah, no, personally, I'd be curious to hear what Ryan's got to say about this when he gets back. But obviously, this is going to change our level of involvement. I don't think it would be too big of a challenge, but ultimately, that's going to be up to Ryan. So, but I personally like the direction you're going with it.
Okay. All right. Let's see who else we have on here. All right, Jill, what do you think? You want it written any different? Anything? There are different ideas. Are you doing it any different? Do you want to move a different direction? What are your thoughts?
No, I think I'm okay with the writing. I think I'm okay with it.
Okay. Sounds good. Owen, what are you guys thinking in Bismarck?
Hey Doug, yeah, we're working with our city environmental health, our licensing here. We've already put out notification through them that compliance is required before their 2025 mobile food license will be approved. So we're enforcing it this year. We gave verbal notification to everybody who we were able to make contact with at events kind of last summer, last autumn. So
Okay.
in our jurisdiction, the word is out.
So you guys have a sunset clause and are going to enforce that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Doug, I have a quick question.
Yep.
So this is talking about, not being able to be corrected immediately. Does like if it's a 4-day festival or if it's the fair or something like that? I mean, are we saying immediately means we're here today, it's not corrected or it's not properly installed or whatever? If they can get it done before they open up tomorrow, I mean, is that considered, I guess immediate, or would they have to have a written plan of correction for something like that, or is it just we're going to be back tomorrow? If you don't have it done, then you'd have a plan of correction? I mean, I guess,
Good
do you have
question.
any clarification on that?
I think it's really just situational dependent. I think that's why we tried to kind of stay away from really like a very defined approach, just because there's going to be some differences, and what may be doable in one community may not in another. If somebody's having if somebody's doing a food unit up in, I don't know, Crosby, they may not be able to get their fire extinguisher serviced before the next day when they're planning to make all their money. If somebody's in the city of Williston and they're opening up the next day, they might be able to get it serviced the next. You know what? I think it's just so situational, and then also just what the code is or section is that the violation is so situational too. I think it's kind of got to be, I don't know, at least from our office, that would just be something that we would probably take into consideration is, hey, when is it reasonable for this to be done? And if it can't be done in, whatever time we think is reasonable, then I think that is the place for a plan of correction. At least that would be our approach.
Hey,
Okay,
Jill,
and-
Jill and Grand Forks, when we go out to events, we don't get to a point where we say, you gotta pack up your stuff and go. What we've moved to is, they are licensing through our finance department. They have to come get an inspection with us before they get their license. So it's prior to the events, so we don't have to try to police it during the events. So we don't get approved for a license until they've had a fire inspection and they're signed off on it. That's kind of how we do it.
So, I think, so for us, when somebody wants to have a license for our area, they have to have a pre-inspection from us as well, and they have to have a past inspection. So for our area, like our food trucks, it's usually not an issue. It's typically like the fairs or the bigger events where we have people coming in from other cities or other states, like just they have a lot of vendors that they have good relationships with, so they use the same ones every year, but they're from all around, and they come in, and of course it's like, oh well, nobody from X, Y, and Z told us we had to do that, or nobody so and so told us well, you're going to be here for 5 days, everything is a mess, we got to figure it out. And I feel like if they're floaters, if they move around to different areas and you continue to say like, oh well, you can do this in 30 days, and like, okay, well, no problem, I'll do it in 30 days, then they just float on to the next place, and then they never have to do it because they just continue to, I guess, say that they're going to, and then they move on.
Yeah,
So I was just,
we work with the event coordinators like the fair here, and we just, if they're one of those that's doing that, we just tell them, they don't have a license for us, and then the fair won't have to come. That's one option.
and I'm glad that you said that. Like I do feel like in the last year, maybe 2 years, we've been better at voicing what our expectations are going to be to the coordinator beforehand, so that there aren't any surprises, and it's it pushes it back more on the vendor, like, hey, you knew that this was going to need to be required, so we feel less sorry for you right now that you're not prepared. But I like that reminder of making sure we're communicating what the requirements are to the vendor before, or excuse me, to the event coordinator beforehand.
I got to piggyback on Jill here a little bit. I kind of agree. Most of these food vendors are not, this isn't their first day. They've been doing this for years. We don't have many first day showing up type deals. They all know what needs to be done. Nothing's really changed in most of that stuff. So when they show up and say, oh, I didn't know I had to have a fire extinguisher serviced and now I can operate for 5 days. We've talked to guys who've been like all the way from Florida to here, and they'll tell you, you show up at any other state in most event and you don't have it, you're not operating. And it was kind of interesting for some of the guys we talked to out of Florida that just travel all last year. And suggest that with you guys, just kind of talk to some of them and see how do some of the others do it. And you just don't open if you don't have some of the stuff. Not saying we have to go there, but they can definitely float from event to event.
Right. So, I mean, for that, I mean, we've kind of leaned on the whole licensing, and to us, if somebody keeps showing up year after year to the state licensing, then that's where we've kind of said, well, we should have a letter, we should have an inspection on file, and we should know what are concurrent issues. So we've kind of taken the approach of we'll play the long game, and if somebody tricks us once, well, good for them, but we just need stuff in place to make sure that doesn't become a constant situation where they're dodging it. Let's see. Dana, how about Minot? Any different approach? Anything you guys would like to see on this?
Well, I know Robbie has some information he wanted to share.
Okay.
So I'll let him talk first.
Okay.
Oh, you just talk.
Robbie, you there?
I'm here. I was just talking to Robbie, trying to get his opinion. Sorry. What we were looking at here in Minot is just having something consistent throughout the state, somewhere where they could license here in Minot and Fargo would accept that they had their inspection done in Minot. That way, if they're moving around within the state, they had something. That would be something we'd like to see happen. But that would require, obviously, what we got going here with this code information is having something consistent that we all follow for inspections and enforcement.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's exactly hopefully what we're getting here is that's why we want to have these discussions is the discussion isn't just to figure out it's hopefully to figure out like can we all kind of come together on some sort of a similar
I think we're in similar boats as Fargo. We don't generally do the inspections. We allow the health department here in Minot, first district, to do the inspections, and then if they have issues, they give us a call and we assist with resolving issues. Kind of back them up on the enforcement side of it because it's just doing the same inspection twice as far as it goes. They're looking at the exact same things as we are. Actually, they're looking at more, but they hit everything that we hit. So a lot of times they do the inspection and we don't even see anything here in Minot.
And that's actually how, and I think Julie will get into that here shortly. So maybe we should jump over. Actually, I want to make sure we get to Shane here. After we get to Shane, we'll jump over to the licensing stuff and kind of talk about what the idea is for these things through licensing. But yeah, as I kind of said at the beginning, we rely heavily on Julie's team to basically just do their licensing and know what things to check for. And then if they run into an issue or if they run into missing equipment or if they run into a concern, then that's what we've kind of always been there for. Exactly what you said, Dana, is to avoid duplication of efforts, but yet provide help and assistance really where needed. So I think that's a good point. Shane, what do you have for us?
I just appreciate all the group's work on this. This is something that we've, I think, all been kicking around for many years now. And I appreciate Doug in your office bringing this kind of top-down approach. Helps things a lot and is going to eliminate a lot of headaches for all of us. I think there'll be a little bit of pain throughout the first year of notifying some of these, dare I say, problem childs that we have. But once we overcome that, I think that we're all going to be in a really good spot. So I appreciate everybody very much.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. So Julie, I think that kind of gets us to our section. I'll follow up with you on some of these fire code stuff, but if you want to kind of take it away on what, from the licensing's viewpoint and thoughts on how this process will work and what we'll be looking at, that would be great.
Absolutely. I will try to be brief. Are we on till about 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So, and I'm happy to come back if any of this kind of, seems a bit confusing and you want to absorb it and then talk about it a little bit more. So I'm going to just put food and lodgings website in the chat if you haven't had a chance to check it out. We are trying to build this kind of for resources statewide, and I was looking for ideas as well to make improvements. I'm going to start just going through the fact sheet and these bullet points under mobile food unit license requirements. So the state Department of Health and Human Services has the authority to license mobile food units as food service under Century Code 2309. And then what we do is we offer a memorandum of understanding to local public health units to delegate that authority. It's either a delegation of authority or they have the authority under home rule and under their own local ordinances. So it is a little bit of a mix. And we have worked over the past, 2 to 3 years to try to work together with the local public health units on a program for reciprocity for licensing mobile food units. It is, as Shane had mentioned, there is always maybe a little bit of a learning curve and some wrinkles to iron out, which we kind of have been over the past couple of years. But overall, we do find that most local public health units are interested in taking this approach. One of the things that we're going to be working on our website, and I'll just throw it up here real quick. And these resources might be already useful to you. So when we get an application for a mobile food unit, and mobile food unit is defined under 2309 and is a fully enclosed food service establishment. That opposed to a temporary food service, which are push carts, stick stands, or tents. And I know that there's some fire code probably application there as well. But for reciprocity, and I can try to explain that a little bit better, but for reciprocity, we are only considering it under licensing for mobile food units. And it's mostly because a mobile food unit is a fully enclosed commercial kitchen. Sometimes we do require a commissary if they can't accommodate all their warewashing within that and or all their storage of food and food that requires refrigeration, but they don't necessarily need a commissary to operate a mobile food unit. Temporary food service is kind of a different animal. Temporary food service is a different type of license. They do need to kind of set up and have that oversight. They oftentimes require a commissary, and they're just a little bit more difficult to wrangle amongst all these different jurisdictions. Temporary food service is not off the table for reciprocity. However, we wanted to establish a reciprocity program that could be something that was almost maybe easy to implement. And temporary food service is just causing a lot more angst and confusion over it. So we are talking mobile food units, and just to kind of understand that they are defined separately in 2309, therefore do get licensed differently. and they do have some different requirements and some different limitations. So mobile food units, we do have this plan review manual that we have available online, and then we have our application. Again, temporary food units would follow different guidance for how they can set up, and their application is a different license application, which is you can scroll down and look through those as well. And then the other thing that we find very useful is the statewide licensed units. And this is something that looks like a simple list, but it actually is quite the heavy lift to to get everyone's data from all the different jurisdictions that handle mobile food. But on a year basis, we try to get this updated. You can see the last it was updated was 9/3/2024. We're working to get it updated by Memorial Day weekend of 2025. And then we try to update it once or twice throughout the season, knowing that these are dynamic and sometimes come and go. But you can see, you know, as of last year or any time during the current licensing season, who is actually licensed and who are they licensed by. So we base the business address, the owner, the licensing agency is here. So you can see First District, you can see Bismarck Burley, you can see Grand Forks, Fargo Cass. Not all local public health units have the capacity to do regulatory environmental health programs. Only about 8 local public health units in the state do this type of work, and only a portion of those cover mobile food. And then how that kind of works is that food and lodging does everything else. So it's a little bit of a patchwork, and I'm going to show you how to kind of find out for your cities and your jurisdictions how you find who your food licensing agent is. But this is a pretty handy sheet to look through to see if you have someone licensed and where. And our local public health units through our reciprocity program, we urge them to work with their event planners, find out what food vendors are planning to be there, make sure they're licensed first. And if they're already licensed, then they can use this as a tool for reciprocity. So if First District Health Unit already has them licensed, I may be okay. Well, I definitely don't need to license them, and I may even be okay if they've been inspected in the last 6 months. I might not even need to inspect them, which helps us prioritize our workload and such there. I'm going to go back to the website here. So, and then there's, you know, all the regulatory codes where it comes to food, and you guys probably have enough fun with fire code, but it's all there if you need it. And then to just go back to the third bullet, I'm sorry, I'm still on the second bullet. So we're talking about putting our website link there. And then what we're building is a map. So we have like a decision tree handout and a map. And this is hopefully supposed to help figure out kind of who does what throughout the state based on the memorandum of understanding in their local jurisdiction. And then of those, who offers reciprocity. So up on the top here, again, this isn't available online yet. I need to kind of go through a communications approval, and we'll build this into our outreach and education. And I want you all to have access to it, and hopefully it's helpful. So on the map, we're kind of trying to depict everything in dark blue. There's reciprocity offered. And these are also listed across the top as far as jurisdiction. So food and lodging is kind of those in black. And then First District Health Unit, they're part of our reciprocity program and accept that. And those counties are highlighted. Some of these local health units, they're districts, they're county, and some are cities. So you just kind of have to know that about the local public health units. But hopefully this helps also give an idea. Southwestern District Health Unit outlined it in this burnt orange color, offers reciprocity. Grand Forks Public Health is just a city. So like in Grand Forks County, Food and Lodging comes out and does all the mobile food unit licensing outside of the city, but the city of is Grand Forks Public Health. And then the two outliers, and just so you're aware, Doug is attending a similar meeting on my behalf. Thank you, Doug. That's on April 9th. So we're having a similar meeting, just like Doug is holding with you today, to kind of remind the local public health units where we're at. It did fire code has been probably one of the most common topics brought up in offering reciprocity because we all adopt very similar food codes. In fact, most of these that you're seeing here listed adopt the state food code by reference. First District Health Unit writes their own food code, but it's pretty much the same. And everyone else pretty much adopts it by reference. There may be a few little changes, but for the most part, you're going to see very consistent food code requirements. And that means the license and the plan review and the pre-operational inspection is pretty similar as well. Our outliers are Bismarck Burley Public Health. So they only cover the city of Bismarck. That star maybe could be edged over a little bit. And then like anywhere else in Burley County for food lodging comes and does. Fargo is the outlier. Fargo Cass Public Health does not offer reciprocity, and that's just in the city of Fargo and city of West Fargo. Anything in the ETA or out in the county food and lodging covers, and that includes the Red River Valley Fair. And so that is kind of how mobile food units are licensed and regulated throughout the state. So food and lodging, under that memorandum of understanding with these 5 health units, and what those 5 health units don't cover, food and lodging does everything else. We are working, this is maybe not going to be super helpful because you're not going to be able to read it very well, but the piece that goes with that map is this decision tree. And again, you know, we need to make sure that this goes through our communications review. And so it's not available yet, but it kind of defines how we view reciprocity and what is considered the lead licensing agent is their base of operation. So that's kind of like, where is your commissary approved for? Or another easy way to say is like, where do you park your mobile food truck when you're not using it? The other very important piece of this, and all local public health units have agreed to the best of my knowledge. Sometimes they change minds, but from my understanding, and this is how food and lodging operates, for any mobile food unit that comes out of state, they are not offered reciprocity. And one of the reasons why is because the food code is pretty similar in other states, but we don't know what their fire code requirements are. And it's not off the table, but until we kind of decide how that would and could work, for now, we just decided anyone coming in from out of state, if you're coming into any of these jurisdictions, you could and should expect to be licensed. I think really the only way it probably could work is any mobile food unit coming from out of state would maybe need to be licensed by food and lodging, and then the other local public health units could offer reciprocity because food and lodging works with the state fire marshal, and we're going to make sure that they meet fire code before we license them. But that is not really what we have capacity for at this time. And so we just to simplify it and not hold this up, we want action, we want this to work, and we don't want to kind of hold off and wait to work through all these kind of nuances. We just don't offer reciprocity for out of state. And then if I could go back to the, I'm having a hard time finding this here. The third bullet restates that. So mobile food units whose base of operation is located out of state are not offered reciprocity. And that's just as of now. Temporary food stands such as tents, booths, or push carts are not considered mobile food units and are not offered reciprocity. All state and local public health units provide similar food code requirements throughout the state of regulated mobile food units. So how that works is that when they apply for a license application, we do a plan review And then we would require pre-operational inspection before they operate. And most local public health units do that similar. And so that inspection, is kind of maybe an interesting point to discuss further because, maybe there are some local fire departments that also require a fire inspection. And I've seen, like in my day, doing inspections out in fairs and street fairs and other temporary events. I mean, I've seen local health departments come out and do inspections on site for that event too. So where that inspection happens and who does that inspection might be a little bit a duplicative in that manner. But just so you know, before a license is issued on the food side, we are in there doing an inspection. And by no means are we experts in fire code, but we can look to see if there's a tag and when it was last inspected. And we work with Doug and he does a great job kind of informing us. And we can write down and we do document in our published comment if we do note fire code is not up to code or maybe even just not inspected on time. And then we report, there's a state law actually that we report any fire code violations that we know. We report those monthly to Doug. And then Doug reports those back out to the local fire department. So at some point you would probably be informed of what we see. But that relationship with your local public health units is really important. And we've been trying to foster that understanding with local public health units as well. Like they should be reaching out to you and understanding what your fire code requirements are and that you're comfortable with what their licensing procedures are, including the plan review, including the pre-op inspection. Because typically after the pre-op inspection is when the license is issued. And that license expires December 31st of every year. So it's on a calendar year. So part of the general licensing to meet general fire code requirements is under the law 2309. And then our food code is 33-33-4.1. And so there's some general kind of overlap in our codes. It's definitely not meant to replace any fire code or replace that authority. That is absolutely not what it's meant to do. But I think, when we look at the state and how rural it is, I mean, and especially with where food and lodging, you saw food and lodging kind of does everything else. So the city centers are usually covered by a local agency, and then food and lodging is out in the counties and all these rural areas. And there a lot of times it's just not a fire department that is equipped to do inspections. Maybe it's a volunteer fire department, something like that. So that's why Doug's office has been so important to work with because sometimes there just isn't an authority there to do inspections or to even ask, are you double checking like on any of these things? There just isn't the resource there. So there is some a little bit overlap, and I think, I mean, the laws predate me and my tenure here, but I think that was the intent, right? Because we do all restaurants, we do all lodging, and I mean, there's just not always a fire authority there. So we do have generalists, like if you need to have something that's generally going to protect the health and safety of the public, and that's kind of where our license comes in. But we don't want to enforce fire code under this license. That I don't think would probably even hold up in court. So, that's where we need kind of some of that assistance. And then, maybe if the city doesn't have fire department, maybe they rely on their township or their county, things like that. Same with building codes and enforcement of building codes. We kind of run into the same thing. So that's kind of how we handle it. I do know we're a little bit just over time. I want to make sure I had any questions answered, or if you do have questions, if you want to feed them to Doug, I'll be happy to kind of respond, and then we can let you all know, you know, if there's any discussions on our April 9th meeting with local public health units. And if there's any, like, been a change in mindset, like, you know, Bismarck really public health, you know, what, if they haven't offered reciprocity, why, and if they can go through to their commission and work to achieve that goal, is that in place? You know, that I don't know. I'm not aware of anything like currently, but maybe that's something that they want to take up again. And if they tried before, what was the reasoning why the commission didn't approve? You know, those details, I don't have all those details, but I can certainly find out, and then we can bring that information back to you. Are there any questions about our licensing on the food side of things?
So if there aren't, so I think the rough plan is send me any comments or questions you have on that form. We'll share this with you all. I'll probably go through and clean up a couple of those things that we noted. I'll send it out to everybody on the kitchen table group for comment. And then when we are good with what's on the fire comment side of things, then we'll send that back to Julie for a final to go through with the licensing groups and the different licensing divisions out there. And make sure they're on the same page as well and see how much of this we can kind of have as a very common approach and program. That sound right, Julie? And that sound good to everybody else? All right. Well, I will go through, clean those up. We'll send out a final one probably next week to you all for final comments or questions or concerns or anything. And then we'll kind of do the same thing on the health side of things with the different local health units with Julie's crew. And as long as everything looks good, then we'll report back and put out any final documents to everyone and update everyone and hopefully have a pretty common approach to these starting this summer to where we have reciprocity and can work towards that where we don't. All right. Well, that's all we had for this meeting. I appreciate everybody being on this one. This was an important topic that I wanted to make sure we get lots of feedback on. So thank you for your time and being here. Sorry we ran late. Julie, thank you so much for jumping on and spending your time with us this morning and explaining all of the licensing side of things. I think that's really important too.
Thanks for having me, and I'll send you the copy of the updates that I was working on today.
All
Just right now. Okay.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Hey,
Thank you,
thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.